It's not supposed to be there, Mr. Chairman. It's supposed to be over there.
That's why I faced over there and I'm looking at not the American flag. Okay, approval of minutes. Regular meeting minutes, consideration of regular meeting minutes of July 9th, 2019 for review and approval.
Move to approve as submitted.
Second it.
I have a motion, I have a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, consideration of public comments. Those wishing to address the Planning and Zoning Commission need not request permission in advance. Action taken as a result of public comments will be limited to directing staff to study the matter or rescheduling the matter for consideration and decision at a later time pursuant to ARS 38-431. Please step up, state your name.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is C. Russell. I am the Chairman of the Clean City Commission, and I'm here to kind of remind people that in September we have our annual Day of Caring, where we get volunteers to go out and clean up the city and make it presentable. This year is going to be late in September. Andy Devine Days is on the 28th, so we're going to do it the weekend between the fair and Andy Devine Days, which is on the 21st of September. And what the Clean City Commission is trying to do is expand on our Adopt a Block program, and we're going to be not only trying to get people to join in on the Adopt a Block program, but to adopt walking trails and adopt a park. We're going to be contacting locals that live around parks to see if they would sort of get a group watch, for better lack of a better word, together to kind of clean up the parks. We're working with Mike Mearsman on this, and trying to keep our parks a little cleaner than what they are, and the walking trails after storms, make them to where they're safe, where there isn't branches and whatnot interfering with the trails. So if anyone of this group is interested, the Clean City Commission cleans up an area from the Flying J gas station all the way down to the DMV, both sides of Andy Devine. And I would like to maybe talk the commissions, not only this commission, but all the rest of the commissions, into maybe joining in. If you wanted to help the Clean City Commission, or if there's a block that you would like to take on yourselves, or if you already belong to an Adopt a Block program, to convince other people to join in on this. We try and get, we've had as many as 400 volunteers on that particular Saturday. Now that the city is looking better and better, our volunteers have dropped down to about 300 last year. But still, it's kind of a fun thing. It goes from 7 o'clock in the morning until noon. The sanitation department cleans up the bags of trash that are picked up and left for them to pick up. So I have little flyers here I would like to pass out to everybody. So kind of keep you aware of it, if I may.
Yes.
Thank you.
We work in conjunction with the River Cities United Way, and if you want to join the Adopt a Block program, you can get an application from Clean City Commission. In fact, I imagine Rich Ruggles is probably got those applications available. If not, you can get a hold of Rob Owen. He has them. So, thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for informing us. Appreciate it. Any more comments from the general public? Wes has none today. Thank you. All right, reports. A, pass council action. Rezoning case RZ19-0001. Richard?
Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, both the rezoning cases that are in front of under past council action were approved by the council. And also, it's not on here, but I was just going to mention the cases before you regarding the front side yard setbacks. That was a city-initiated case. We've kind of tabled that in light of the applicant who was most directly affected by that item over at Southern Vista Drive, they are applying for, or are going to be heard before the Board of Adjustment with a variance case on August 29th. So that would be specifically for their property and whether a variance can be granted for that situation. And there will actually be a new, I guess, improved version of that text amendment before you next month that it's going to be for your consideration with some sort of a twist on the argument about changing those front yard setbacks that is coming not from the city, but is from a developer. So that's just to give you a little heads up.
So you're saying it's a good day to be gone?
I'm sorry?
It's being facetious.
Oh, okay. Didn't catch that.
Any further questions? All right, Richard, thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Item 4, new business. Planning and Zoning Commission orientation. Planning and zoning staff will present a PowerPoint to the Planning and Zoning Commission in regards to their duties and decision-making process. Richard.
So this will be just pretty informal. It'll be more like a work session. This is something we usually do at the beginning of the year when we have new commission members. We don't have that in this case. Although we didn't do this at the beginning of the year. Often in conjunction with an open meeting law presentation from the clerk's office. But we thought since we didn't have anything else on the agenda, this would be a time to do this. Just kind of go over what you do, what you don't do, the purpose of the general plan, the zoning ordinance, the subdivision ordinance, just kind of give a refresher to everybody on all that. So the Planning and Zoning Commission, I think heard this all before, but it consists of the 7-member volunteer members appointed by the City Council. You serve as the advisory board, as an advisory board to the City Council. We meet at 5:30 the second Tuesday of each month, and you're all appointed to serve 3-year terms. You can also be appointed to serve less than a full term if you're appointed to fill a term that's been vacated by somebody prior to the end of their term. And then you can serve up to full 3-year terms. You can be appointed for more than 2 terms if the council does agree to do that by a supermajority vote of the council. And also, commissioners are required to be city residents at least 180 days before they're appointed, and have to serve or have to continue to be residents of the city while they're serving. If you do move out of the city while you're serving on the commission, please let us know. So this is the current lineup. It's all of you. So the primary duties that the commission, the Planning and Zoning Commission handles, this is the stuff that we do on a more regular basis. You are charged with the handling the public hearings on the Kingman General Plan update every 10 years. And you can also hear major and minor amendments to the general plan. Major amendments can only be heard once a year in May. Minor amendments can be heard at any time, potentially. Also, you could hear requests for specific area plans to be incorporated into the general plan, and those could be either minor or major amendments, depending on what they're actually proposing to do. The things that you do most often are here: abandonment, conditional use permit cases, and the rezoning requests. Also, requests for text amendments to the zoning ordinance. Been pretty common. Hopefully, we'll hear less of those as we get our zoning ordinance updated. And then you also are involved in reviewing the preliminary subdivision plat applications when someone is beginning the process to subdivide the property. You also hear requests for text amendments to the subdivision ordinance in certain cases, mainly having to do with anything involving the preliminary subdivision plat process. So other commission duties, and these are described in the zoning ordinance, but these are less common. One would be to review manufactured home park or recreational vehicle park plans, whether it, or in the case if it's brand new, if it's a new park, you would review that, or if they're making modifications, or in the case more recently when you've heard some proposal to allow park models into a manufactured home park. You'll hear those types of cases. You could hear appeals from the design review requirements of the C2H of our zoning district, which is the district along Walpole Mountain Road, and also the Bank Street Design Overlay District. That would be cases where someone is putting in a building in that area and they wish to deviate from the requirements, the design requirements of those areas. That would be something that come before you for your review. You could also hear appeals for modifications to the parking requirements on properties in the multiple family districts, R2, R3, and R4, and also C1. The multiple family districts are for situations where you have a unique population, say a senior complex, and they want to have less parking than what is normally required for that type of normal apartment complex. That can be considered, assuming the population doesn't typically drive. The C1 district is, we haven't seen one of these in a long time, but we had a rash of rezonings that occurred along Stocking Hill Road, where the houses were converted into commercial uses over the years, and there was an issue with the parking. There was really no place to put off-street parking except to have it basically expand the driveway and allow them back into the side streets. So that can be approved under certain circumstances by the commission. Normally, it wouldn't be allowed. And then finally, design deviations from the appearance criteria. This is specifically for single-family houses. We have an appearance criteria which requires certain roof pitches, roof materials, siding, the materials for the houses, sizes, things like that. The staff is permitted to approve one deviation from that criteria. If they request two or more, it would be the commission would have to be involved in that appeal and review. And this is one of the rare instances where that appeal is actually final with the commission, doesn't go on to the council. So what does the commission not do? And there's a lot of things that come up in our discussions that appears to be something you would be involved in, but maybe it doesn't, depending on the circumstances. One would be variances. You don't hear variances from the zoning ordinance itself, except for the exceptions that I already described to you. Those are the duty of the Board of Adjustment. The commission is also not tasked with making development decisions or recommendations to the city council related to approval or denial of building permits, which is just a staff level approval, and denial of final subdivision plats, which is handled by the council. Also releases of or an acceptance of assurances is handled by the council. Requests for street improvement deferrals, that goes before the traffic safety committee and then on to the council. Requests for encroachment permits are either staff level or could potentially require council approval depending on the level of the encroachment. Requests for driveways are actually handled through the engineering department. Requests for minor lot splits, known as parcel plats, are also staff level approvals, except in cases where they're granting a right-of-way or an easement on the parcel plat, and that has to be actually approved by the council, and the council has to authorize the mayor to sign that granting of that easement or right-of-way. Any issues related to public nuisances and property maintenance, we hear that a lot. Weeds and other things that come up in our discussions. That actually is part of the Kingman Municipal Code, not actually addressed mostly within the zoning ordinance. So any changes or amendments to the Kingman Municipal Code are actually handled through the city attorney's office, and also the council approves those. And then finally, issues related to infrastructure or utility improvements typically aren't part of your discussion unless it's a condition of approval for a case being heard by the P&Z Commission. A good example would be the case we had several months ago with the veterans duplexes, in which there was concerns over traffic, and there was discussion about the traffic light on Walpole Mountain Road. That's the type of thing that would be part of your consideration. We do have to be careful, though, that we don't impose a condition on a rezoning that is it needs to be proportional to what they're doing, and there has to be, the courts have said, a nexus between what they're proposing to do and the impacts that it will have. So we have to always be careful about that we don't overstep.
Richard,
Sure,
we don't have a board of adjustments, do we?
we do.
We do. Is there, that was I was just told I thought we didn't have one, because,
We didn't, well, we have one, most of the members were either termed out or had left, so we had to recreate the board. It's a 7-member board. Currently, there are 5 members because Vicky was appointed, she was on the board briefly, and then she was appointed to Planning and Zoning Commission, and unfortunately, a member just passed away, so we have 5 members right now. So now we're going into the tools that you use in things that you consider when making decisions and recommendations to the City Council. First would be the Kingman General Plan 2030. So that is the primary tool to guide long-range growth and development of the city. It is a statement of our policies, goals, and objectives of the city. Includes a projected land use map, which indicates how citizens desire to have the city develop. Any request for rezoning must be in conformance with the projected land use map. That's actually a state statute requirement. And the Planning and Zoning Commission is charged, as I mentioned before, with the general plan update process every 10 years and makes recommendations to the council related to proposed changes to the plan. That can be at any time. The full general plan has to be updated or readopted on or before the 10-year anniversary of the plan's most recent adoption. So the last time we adopted it was March of 2014, so we're about halfway through the life of that plan now. And the citizens ratified the plan in November of that year. And so that also is a requirement of the state that it has to go before the voters. So next time we would do a full update of the general plan would be, well, it would have to be finished by 2024. We would start that process probably in 2022, so about 3 years. So this is the projected land use map, which is part of the general plan and is probably the part of it that you're most familiar with. The way it sort of breaks down, we break down the residential areas by density and then the commercial areas by intensity of use. It's not an exact one-to-one rate, ratio or exact match with the zoning districts, but it gives you a pretty good idea which districts would fall into these categories. It guides the zoning, in other words. So the rural density residential, that's 1 unit or less per acre. Typically, you can have RRR 140 type zoning there. Low density residential is going to be typically R120, the half-acre lots. Medium density residential is going to be the other R1 districts, going down to R16. Intermediate density and high density residential is going to be the R2, R3, and R4 type, apartment complex type development. And then we get to the neighborhood commercial, community commercial, regional commercial. Neighborhood commercial typically is C1, some C2 areas. Community commercial can be C2 or C3, typically along major streets. Regional commercial is going to be the major shopping centers, the Home Depots, the Walmarts, the Safeways, the Smiths, places like that. And those are all going to be C3. Then also we have highway service commercial, which is at the 2 interchanges, the major interchanges either in the town, again for the highway traveler, the motels, the truck stops, gas stations, typically serve those areas. Again, it could be C2 and C3. Light industrial, manufacturing industrial pretty much correspond with I-1 and I-2. And then public, quasi-public could be almost any district, but they are things like schools, the airport, the fairgrounds, the hospital, cemetery, any sort of public use of public property. And then finally, you have parks and open space, which are the areas either develop open space in town, develop parks, the golf course, or areas that we would project to be preserved in the future, potentially, because of the status of the property or the topography. So that's the land use map. So So then the zoning ordinance is the way we implement the policies of the general plan through the establishment of the zoning districts and the various development standards. Unlike the general plan, which guides land use decisions, the zoning ordinance actually regulates the use of property. And as you know, it was adopted in 1971. It's pretty out of date. We are in the process of updating it now. And I'll have a little something on that a little later, where we're at with that. And then this is our zoning map. Sorry, it's a little blurry there, but you can see there's a lot more districts than we have land use designation in the city. It's a little more detailed. We have about 25, I think, districts in town. With the R1 through R being the residential districts, and then the rest are the commercial and industrial districts typically. And then finally, the subdivision ordinance regulates the division of land and what improvements must be made in order to subdivide in the land in the city. This is an administrative process, not a legislative process, although you are involved with approving the preliminary plats. Subdivisions are also not subject to referendum of the voters. So a zoning case, someone can refer that to the voters to be considered to be potentially overturned. Subdivisions are not subject to that. It also does not regulate land use. It does tell you how, to an extent, where the lots can be, how big they can be, widths, street widths, utilities, and things like that. This is just an example of the subdivisions, part of the Shangri-La Estates subdivision preliminary plat that you saw maybe a year or two ago. So in the decision making for the general plan, the commission needs to consider the following. It's fairly straightforward. You need to consider whether the amendment is consistent with the policies and objectives of the general plan, whether the proposed amendment furthers the public health, safety, and welfare of the citizens of Kingman, and if you're changing the land use map, finding must be made whether the proposed change will be compatible with the other land uses in the plan in the city. For any decision making regarding the zoning ordinance, for rezoning cases that amend the zoning map, the commission needs to consider the following. One would be the need for uses permitted in the zoning district, the suitability of the proposed zoning change, any negative impacts on the surrounding area and the community in general, and as I mentioned before, does the zoning conform to the general plan? And text amendments need to also consider the compatibility with the goal and objectives of the Kingman general plan. And then finally, for conditional use permits, this does get a little bit more detailed. The commission needs to consider things such as whether or not the CUP is consistent with our applicable regulations, whether it's compliance with whether it's in compliance with our bulk regulations, which are things like setbacks and parking and landscaping and things like that. Any negative impacts on the surrounding area and community in general that could occur because of the CUP. Impacts on traffic patterns, whether there are needs for landscaping or fencing for the type of use to be proposed. And we wanted to also, of course, avoid creation of nuisances. And there may be other conditions related to the development of the property, including, as I mentioned, streets and infrastructure that could be impacted by that. And finally, decision-making for preliminary plats. The commission needs to consider the following: whether the plat is consistent with the subdivision ordinance requirements and the zoning ordinance requirements as well, such as the lot sizes and things like that. Also, if a developer is proposing a petition of exception, they can request petitions for exceptions to certain regulations of the subdivision ordinance, and you are tasked with making a recommendation to the city council on those. And they have to be something unique to the property. A good example would be a subdivision that cannot connect to the city sewer because of topography. That would be an exception that could be unique to the property that you would have to consider. So that's the decision-making part. And then some just general rules of thumb. And this gets into the questions of conflicts of interest, and we've all heard what that is, although we're not always certain what that means. There's actually, and I'm not the city attorney, obviously, but there are actually legal definitions to what is a substantial conflict of interest, and what is a remote conflict of interest, and what is not a conflict of interest. So a substantial conflict of interest would be, if it's an item before you, rezoning, let's say, a piece of property, and you have some sort of financial interest in that property, that would be a substantial conflict of interest, and you'd want to stay out of that conversation, and obviously not participate in discussing it or voting on that item. A remote interest would be something, say, a distant relative, or maybe more distant relative of yours has some interest in a property that's before you. That it could be a conflict of interest. It depends on the situation. That would be the type of thing where you'd want to let us know ahead of time if you think there may be a concern. We can always run it by the city attorney and ask them, is this an issue? Do they need to stay out of it? One thing I would recommend that you do is if you feel that you do have a conflict of interest and the item comes up on the agenda, Gary announces it, you'd want to, at that moment is when you'd want to say, I feel I have a conflict of interest in this item, I'd like to stay out of the conversation. You don't have to remove yourself from the dais up here, but you just need to stay out of the conversation. You want to make that announcement at the beginning, not at the end of the presentation. So just something to keep in mind. You don't have, generally though, it's not a conflict of interest if you happen to know the person that's before you. So if you had dealings with them in the past or you just know them, that normally is not a conflict of interest. It's up to you whether you want to continue to be part of that or not, but normally it is not a legal conflict of interest just because you know somebody that's in front of you. Another thing would be to avoid making personality-based decisions and stick to the facts and the information before you. And the example would be, and this is something in the past, not this current commission, but I've seen situations where someone is before the commission on a case, and a comment is made, something to the effect that so-and-so is a pillar of the community, he's been here 47 years, and we know they're going to do a first-class job. And that may all be true, but it's not the type of thing you want to say out loud in a public hearing. You want to kind of stick to the facts and information and treat everybody the same. So it's just something to be mindful of, I guess. And then finally, public comments and concerns are important. We always have to hear what the public has to say. It's not always easy when you have a big crowd back here, and they all have legitimate concerns over something that's before you. But that you have to kind of balance that with considering what are the best planning practices, what's the staff recommendation, and what the overall needs of the community is. And so that's not an easy thing to do, and you're all volunteers, and we all really thank you for your help, and you're willing to do that for $0. So we appreciate that. I know Gary had a few words also on this subject, I think, too.
I think really, Mr. Chairman, the most important thing here is really this slide, because the general plan is the Bible, and so does it conform? Does it fit within the general plan? And I think then the other second is avoid making those personal-based decisions, because we all, I've sat here, as I'm sure all of you have, and you think about it, or in a personal way. But does it fit within the guidelines? Did it meet the zoning requirements? Did it meet all of those criteria? And then you make your decision on that. The other thing is, I think that, and I have found this for myself, is that, we certainly have made some good decisions, and then we'll go to council and find them reversed. So to remember that, to keep the skin a little thick on some things like that, because again, they have that second chance at council, and again, it could be depending on, did the council, were they susceptible to the crowd that evening or whatever? And so you have seen the same pressures, occur with you. And so I think that's the important thing. The other thing that I just wanted to take a minute to update on is, Rich, are you going to talk a little bit more about where you are with the situation related to the updates with the? Yeah,
I can, yes.
Yeah, I will just tell you, it's been, it's a lot of work. And I just want to tip my hat to both Rich and Sylvia, because the consultant is doing a ton of work, and he's really kind of gone beyond even the scope that we had hoped, and able to give us almost a turnkey product. But there's an awful lot of work that's going into this, and so what I really hope for is that a year and a half from now, we can make your job a lot easier. And so, keep the faith with us as we move through these processes, because I think the revamping of the plans themselves is going to be very acceptable. The sign code thing will be a godsend, if we really can do it right. The biggest challenge is going to become when we look at the implementation of that historical overlay. Because, already I have people calling up going, you're not going to tell me what to do. And that's not the idea. The idea is that we will have something in the holster when it's time to make those decisions, so that you all have the tools in place there. So again, we're here to help. I will tell you that at least in my short time, the year and a half here, is that these two really do care, and I really see the work that goes into it. And the other good thing we can tell you right now is we have now 4 excellent candidates for the planner position, and so now the process will start on who we ultimately will select. So. But we were really extremely pleased on at least, this, if none of these work out, we will extend the period of time and reach out some more. So, but, we knew we had to go beyond Kingman and the community in order to find that talent. So I'd certainly be open to any questions now, both Rich and you all may have. So, but again, I too want to thank you. I see what it takes. I have 4 commissions under my jurisdiction, and it gets wild, and some of the things that happen to all of you, but I certainly thank you for stepping to the plate. So.
And I'll just mention, Gary was talking about our zoning ordinance update. We have scheduled our first workshop here on September 18th at 6 p.m. Got a little dry there. So we're gonna, and it's gonna be, actually get brought that information. Oh, it's over here.
And are you gonna send out an email when it gets a little bit closer? Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be contacting you and letting you know, give you some more detail, but, they're gonna introduce, and it'll be led by the consultant. It won't be a, P&Z Commission meeting. It'll be led by him. They'll be introducing the project, looking at the key challenges and issues with the zoning ordinance based upon his analysis, look at the general plan and how it fits into the zoning ordinance, and begin some suggestions on a new regulatory framework. So that will be September 18th.
When we had 2 meetings, one with some of the members, Terry was on, myself were there, and some others from the community, met with the guy leading the charge
Right.
for update. Mm-hmm. What was the concerns with the builders side?
With the contractors.
Or the contractors in the ordinances? Did they have?
Well, I'm not sure we're exactly staying on topic here. I didn't
Okay.
really drift off that too much, but yeah, we'll go over that when we have that
Okay.
workshop. But
Fair enough.
Okay.
yeah, we probably could have put that on as an agenda item, but we sorry.
Alrighty. Fair enough. Any further questions? All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
All right, item number 5, announcements by commission members, limited to announcements availability or attendance at conferences and seminars, requests for agenda items for future meetings, and requests for reports from staff. No discussion on any of these items.
I have 2. I will not be here at next month's meeting. I have to be in Tucson. And I'd like to revisit the landscaping ordinance, specifically placement of trees, bushes, hedges, flagpoles, et cetera, from the property line and the back of curb, mostly at alleyways and driveways, as opposed to street corners and such. For not next month, but the month after.
For October.
Okay.
I was gonna say, how are we gonna do that if you're not gonna be here?
Telecommute.
Our next meeting is on a Monday. It's September 9th? 9th? All righty. Any further comments? All right, I need someone to make a motion.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I got a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you. Did they get those slides off?